The podcast that floats down here.
Hi, I'm Melissa, your Stephen King veteran.
Hi, I'm Ben, the Stephen King and horror film fanboy.
And hello, I'm Luke, your first-time Stephen King reader.
Good evening, and we're talking tonight about Derry, the third interlude. This chapter, or section, or whatever we want to call it, this interlude, was 18 pages of the book, which turns out to be 1.65% of the entire novel. Luke, you got the recap.
We hear from Mike a story he heard from Mr. Keene, the old pharmacist, about events around October of 1929 when a mobster known as Al Bradley and his gang were hiding out not far from Derry. The FBI were on their trail as Bradley went into Mr. Machen's sporting goods in Derry and placed a large order for ammunition. The store clerk takes the order and arranges for pickup the next day. In the meantime, Machen goes ahead and tells everyone in town that the Bradleys would be back in his store accordingly. All of the men of the town assemble on Main Street with guns in hand when the gangsters arrive. The mob guns the gang down in the streets. Later, the FBI and state police are given credit for taking the Bradley gang down, and Mr. Keene goes on to say that the story wasn't news because it was Derry, not New York or Chicago. The place is what makes it news. Mike prods a little further and asks if there was anything a little bit off that day, and Mr. Keene knowingly answers with the clown, and goes on to tell of how Pennywise was in the town along with the townsfolk carrying guns, shooting, and hanging out of second floor windows during the shootout. Hanging so far, it was as if he were floating, but the clown sure didn't cast any shadows.
All right, so basically we get a rundown of the shootout with the Bradley gang, as told by Mr. Keene. Luke, what's your first note on this?
Something that I know we've definitely touched on is the cyclical nature of the killings, whatever this happening is in Derry that happens every near quarter of a century, 26 to 27 years. And there was a line in here that directly kind of kicks off another thing that we have been talking about, of how there typically seems to be a large event slaughter that ends the cycle, but there also seems to be some kind of initial thing that starts it as well. We've heard that Georgie's death was probably the one that kicked it off in 1958. We heard that Adrian Mellon, who got killed during, Derry Days, or whatever is that what they called it? Mm-hmm. Like, that was the one, it was like a big celebration going on, and it all seemed to be leading towards, and the big finale was, the death of Adrian Mellon. And so they directly call it out in this chapter, and it says, "It is as if a monstrous sacrifice is needed at the end of the cycle to quiet whatever terrible force it is which works here, to send it to sleep," and basically vice versa. The next section kind of says, and there also seems to be something that needs to kick it off. And it's just nice to get confirmation that, we've basically been told that throughout the book, but that's about as blatant as you can be, that, there has to be some ritualistic thing going on.
Yeah, well, the ritualistic sacrifice of Adrian Mellon.
Right.
Go ahead, Melissa.
I mean, if it's a feeding, think about it like after hibernation, when a bear wakes up, the first thing it's going to do is eat because it's hungry, because it hasn't eaten in a really long time, right?
Nope. First thing it's going to do is take a crap. Then it's going to go eat.
Okay, thanks. Then the last thing he does before going back to hibernation is what? Eat another really, really big meal, because he's putting it on so he can sleep. It makes sense. If this is like that kind of monster, it makes sense that it's going to need something to feed it upon waking that's larger than normal, and something to feed it right before to maintain it while it's sleeping.
Yeah, makes sense.
No, absolutely. And I do like how he notes that this took place, I believe, August of 1929. Is what they said, August, September of 1929. I was wondering if he's trying to imply the reawakening could have been something of the responsible for the Black Friday crash, which basically basically.
Too far.
I mean, New York to Derry, the way it was implying it was.
I know, and I saw that. The Derry monster is too localized.
Fair. That's fair. What's your thought first on Melissa?
I really like when we get stories from other voices. I like when we get to hear. That's, I think, why the interludes are kind of my favorite, because it's not just narrator telling us the perspective of Bill or Bev or whoever. It's Mike's voice telling sometimes Mike's story and sometimes his dad's story. And now it's Mr. Keen's story. And I like getting to live in the mind and the vocabulary of those storytellers a little better than just like the omniscient narrator over the shoulder. Because even though it's good, King does such a great job of making us feel like we're sitting in a room listening to somebody spin a tale that can put us in the room of 30 years, 50 years before that. So I really like these.
Oh, yep.
Yep. Yeah, before we started recording tonight, I was chit-chat with Benji, and I was like, man, I went back and reread the other two interlude chapters because at least the first one is pretty easily my favorite one. The Black Spot was a little harder to read because there's actually like the horror, terrible things happening in that chapter, but like the first one and this one feel very, very similar, of more the chit-chatting with the old timers and getting information from back in the day. And these are the guys that, like Albert Carson said in the first interlude, these are the guys that have gone looking a bit, or not even looking, they've experienced some of this and have made it through. So they know these things. They're likely not going to talk about it if you go and ask them, even if they're drunk, but there are keys.
So, Luke, I'm looking at your notes here. I'm seeing a name you have there. Kind of wondering why you have that. I kind of guess I glanced over it in the read.
So, whenever Mr. Keen is telling his story, he references an old police officer named Aloysius Nell. So, instantly, name connection to Officer Nell that we know. And once that popped up, throughout this chapter, we got a lot of family names that were pretty consistent with. We see an old Andy Chris. We see Zach Denbrough, who is Georgie and Bill's dad.
Oh, I missed Chris. That's a good one.
There were several where I was like, okay, we've seen these family names at least in town, which makes sense. Not a big town. Like, these are the people that be around, but I just noticed after Nell, I was like, okay, now I'm really keyed into it.
Yeah. See, I like the line before he really gets into the story. He talks about the home run of the Dodgers player.
Yes.
And he's like, people lied about being at that ball game because they wish they had been there. People would lie to you about being in Derry that day because they wish they hadn't been. And it kind of takes me into a note I have a little later on, but so because we've talked about the collective amnesia of the town, is it a choice to forget or is it a decision to forget? And from what we're getting, it's more just an unspoken agreement. We don't talk about that stuff. There's no need to. We know what happened, and it's not people, as we've talked about in the past interludes, they're not forgetting. They're just not talking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I was going to see if Melissa was going to jump in there.
No, I think it's Fight Club.
Don't talk about it.
That's the first rule.
So you're saying it's more of a choice and not some magical, mystical element that doesn't let them know.
Yeah, I am. I think it's, they know, most of them know what's going on or have a recollection of what happened or what they've seen, but it's just they're not the ones being affected, I guess, or they're not the ones being murdered, so it doesn't matter, I guess. I don't know if that's the exact way of looking at it, but we'll get into a few more things a little bit later here, but that's just the way Derry is. Stuff happens and we move on,
I think the thing that kind of complicates that is the losers, but we also know that they go through something different. At least we're led to believe they go through something actually magical or something that, again, I have no idea where it's going other than they're going to end up thinking that they've killed this monster, and there's some kind of actual amnesia that almost all of them go through, and it doesn't return until that return chapter, or
Yes.
the phone call, where they start getting certain ideas back.
But for the most part, I mean, I know we talked about Mike having some areas blocked out, but he remembers everything because he never left. And so that's what I'm talking about is the town.
Except that Mike said he had forgotten it all until it came back 5 years earlier.
True.
He said that in one of the earlier interludes. So, okay, I have a half-cracked theory over here that's sort of formulating. I do that, so listen to me ramble and see how I go. What if the magical piece of Derry, and I don't mean magical in a good way, I mean like the Pennywise magic in Derry. We've talked a lot about how children have an easier time of accepting the supernatural into their everyday being, and then it just sort of rolls and becomes part of their world without ever questioning it. Therefore, they don't ever worry about it because it's just part of the world, right? Ben seeing the mummy on the ice, and then the next day he goes back to school and like doesn't even think about it again until much, much later. Okay, remember this conversation? Okay.
Yep.
So what if Derry collectively has so much of that underlying magic in the town that the adults never outgrow that the ability to roll the supernatural into their consciousness and just into their being is always there. That's why those old timers from this Bradley gang shootout never stop to really worry about it or talk about it or report it, because again, just like Ben and the mummy or Eddie and the leper, it just rolls into what their day was. It was just a Wednesday, just a Thursday, and then Friday came and, it was hot. Like, it just becomes part of what they do because their world has always been like that. There's always been that kind of weird quirkiness to it. And the people who tend to notice it more and stick out are people like Will, who weren't raised in that type of town, right?
No.
The people who it sticks out. The reason the losers are having such a hard time as adults is because they left. They got out of there. It's not that they were raised there. It's that they didn't stay. And I think for Mike, yeah, he forgot, but as it's coming back for him, it's both. Like, okay, I accept that it's here, but I also know that it's worse because I know more than most of the rest of Derry because of whatever that thing is that the 7 of them went through. Thoughts on my half-formed thought?
Yeah, no, I actually completely agree with you because that does make a lot of sense, and that does kind of play into what I'm saying. It's kind of a mix of amnesia, but it's agreed upon. But it goes into a note I have a little bit later, but I'll just use it here. The casualness, Mr. Keen's retelling of everyone just arriving with their guns, setting up, and just waiting is unnerving. I mean, I get the idea, you get the mentality for vigilantism and justice, but having a whole town just simply take up arms against a gang, no trial, no conviction, is just kind of fucked up.
1930s South.
What's that?
1930s in the South. See, that actually to me does not seem that unusual.
See, and I mean, even then, but like, I can see it from, a group of, 3, 4, 5 people standing up, but an entire town, as it sounds like, setting up and just hanging out there, just without anybody even talking. Everybody just knew this is what's going to happen. So like you said, it was a natural thing of Derry. Hey, this is what's happening. And then the very next day, it was nothing more than just putting down a couple dogs. That's it. Why talk about it? So it's just the casualness of it. Yeah, it's just Derry being Derry.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. I think it's very mob mentality male. It doesn't surprise me at all. I feel like it's very much the 1920s and 1930s rural. That's how we deal with them folk around here, kind of a thing.
But they didn't do anything there. That's
yeah.
That's the part that throws me off.
I think of like To Kill a Mockingbird, where you've got the whole town of the mob that wants to go lynch Tom in the prison, and Atticus Finch is sitting there blocking them. Like it's the same idea.
So the thing that
and I think the thing
sorry.
you guys are focusing on is, wow, there's so many people with guns. I don't know. It just doesn't. I'm not disagreeing with you that it seems like a lot. And it's
that
part doesn't surprise me.
It's not. I shouldn't say it's
shocking.
Surprising. Like I said, it's kind of unnerving because even in like a situation, you look back at people retelling stories of the 1940s and 50s of the race riots and of segregation and lynchings and stuff like that. People who went through them from the negative side, from a lot of times they'll show regret or remorse or anything later on in life for having been involved in that, but just how casual and calm he was in telling this. I found it odd and just unsettling, not surprising, just unsettling of somebody like that.
Yeah, I think the kind of point that I wanted to get to with it is the thing that throws me off a little bit is this gang didn't do anything to Derry. Like it's just word that this is the gang that was robbing banks in the Midwest
in Indiana.
In Indiana. Like I'm a little surprised at how much it ramps up. Like with Tom and Atticus Finch, he's on trial for something with a girl from the town. I mean, he's on trial for that, but it's at the heart of the town, where this feels it's like almost unprovoked, and so that's where I don't get exactly that same connection.
See?
I'm not disagreeing entirely, but
I understand your point. My point is, I think a lot of time there's a lot of unnecessary righteousness that happens when a large group of males get together, and by large, I mean it could be anywhere from 5 to 50, that we're going to take care of this because we're the men and we can, and it's historically pretty typical. That's why this doesn't surprise me, because this is a bunch of men who think it is their duty to take care of it, even though it's not, even though it has, like you said, it has nothing to do with Derry. They could have easily called the cops, and like Mike said, I would have called the cops. They would have taken care of it, but no, we're men and we're going to take care of this. And I feel like there are, and really, To Kill a Mockingbird was just the only big reference.
Sure.
That just feels very typical, very historically accurate on what happens in literature and in stories of when a bunch of men get together and think they can just handle it themselves. And I'm going to be very stereotypical against men on that, but that's how I feel about it.
The only difference I'm going to pull against you is typically in those situations, there would be some sort of conversation apart from just, hey, this gang's in town, and that's it. Not even necessarily. Not even a you know what to do. Just everybody the next day shows up ready to go. There's an underlying. I'm not disagreeing with you. I guess
100% Pennywise pulling these strings.
Yes,
that's just how I feel. I mean, that's how I think
if he is pulling the strings, he's pulling strings that are all over the country and are done all over the country. Maybe he's adding a little sprinkle here, or maybe he's just enjoying it. But I don't think it's that unusual. I think, just like I don't think the thing at the Black Spot was that unusual. I don't think that was that shocking. I think that's absolutely something that would have happened in other places around the country at that time. I just do. I think what Stephen King does is he takes it and he's almost, I feel like he's making maybe a statement on things that just happen and giving it that supernatural spin to make it feel like, oh, it's got to be Pennywise. But I think that's human nature, that mob mentality, that we're better than you mentality, that we're going to pass judgment on you and we don't need the law because we're righteous and we have God behind us, whatever that means. I think it's very much human nature to do that. And using Pennywise is how King pulls off people not seeing that it's just what people do. So we can move on from this because I am not going to convince you, and you are going to keep talking and it's going to drive me crazy. So let's move on to the next point.
So, all right. Go ahead with your next note, Melissa, then.
So my next is, I just wanted to list the Bradley gang because they were fun people. So we have Al Bradley and George Bradley. I couldn't really tell. It seemed like Al Bradley was supposed to be the boss, but really they talked about George Bradley a lot more in the chapter. Then we had the other brothers, Joe and Cal Conklin, who we didn't really get much about Cal. He didn't do much, that guy.
Yeah.
Arthur Creepin' Jesus Malloy, first of all, that is like the best name ever. Secondly, I feel like he is the stereotypical 1930s gangster. I mean, he's got the name, he's got the, I don't want to wear my specs. His last name is Malloy. Everybody's got to have an Irish guy in there somewhere, right? Like, come on, perfect. And then Patrick Cauty, who's, likes to kill people, but he looks pretty.
Yeah, it looks like Adonis.
Yeah. And then, of course, you got the girls. One has to be named Kitty.
Yeah.
I mean, no surprise. And then Marie, who gets passed around. Great.
Yeah.
I bet she loves them.
Real pleasant bunch.
Really? They were bad. They were very nice in town. They bought a dress.
So why did they get shot up?
They went shopping.
One ran into the crossfire.
Yeah, she was trying to give up. That didn't happen so well.
Yeah, just saying. My next note, really quick, was Machin fighting it in 1959. He was too fat, always too fat, but maybe it was something else. Taking the year into account, don't know much about it, but anyone that dies in that time period, I'm gonna be suspect.
Yeah.
So just
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, who knows at this point?
Yeah. Luke, what you got?
So this is kind of when they're talking about like how did no one hear about this? Like this is a big deal. Like people should have, and the newspapers, which Mike had read, just clearly state, the FBI with the help of the local state police, and Mr. Keene basically just like, besides, it happened in Derry, not in New York or Chicago. The place makes it news as much as what happened to the place, Sonny. That's why there are bigger headlines when an earthquake kills 12 people in Los Angeles than there are when one kills 3,000 in some heathen country in the Mideast.
Yeah.
Very, very, very true statement right there. The location means everything for the severity of the news, which it's unfortunately awful and true.
And still apt to this day.
Absolutely.
Even with her 24-hour cycle, nothing must change.
Nope.
So, Melissa, you have your next note. I kind of have a note along with it, so I will let you go ahead, and I will try my best to help you along.
Okay.
So, sorry, I just kind of read your second half of it.
Okay. So, let's go through the shopping list.
Yeah.
Here we go. They wanted 500 rounds of 38 caliber ammunition, 800 rounds of 45 caliber, 60 rounds of 50 caliber, which they don't even make anymore.
50.
Shotgun shells loaded both with buck and bird, and 1,000 rounds of each 22 short and long rifle. Plus, get this, 16,000 rounds of 45 machine gun bullets.
Yeah. So,
and then my question was, I don't even know what all of that is for.
So a 38 is a small handgun or revolver. Okay. 45, larger handgun, typically. A 50 is a big-ass handgun. Something like a Desert Eagle or a Dirty Harry style 44 Magnum that would also come close to that.
45 caliber, wouldn't it?
It would be a 44 caliber, but I'm saying they're along the same lines of a 50. Okay. A bird and buckshot round, I'm guessing they mean a group of birdshot and a group of buckshot. Birdshot is small little pebbles that come out and is a good knockdown. It won't absolutely kill you. Buckshot are very large pellets in a shotgun that will put massive holes, put decent sized holes through you. So that's that. 22 short and long rifle. They're just rifle rounds, typical like a you see now the 223, which is the AR-15 style rounds, and then machine gun rounds. Those are pretty obvious what they're talking about with that. So just wanted to go on with this. Since you had
lots of handguns,
shotgun, and rifles.
And machine guns.
Yep.
That's what I needed. Thank you.
Yep. So, my next note on this was, once something heavy begins to roll, it can't be stopped. It's simply going to roll until it finds a flat place long enough to wear away all of its forward motion. Pretty much damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you don't, you best just let it play out, is my note to it. Of when they say, when all this started going, we could have stopped. We could have just turned around, walked away, but everybody was there, and it's about to go, and it's going to go down. So might as well just let it play out and see where it goes.
Yeah, no, it definitely seemed like once the group was there and they started talking about how, 2 o'clock came and went, it was 10 minutes after, 20 minutes after, and no one hesitated. No one was like, oh, we should get back to work. They were all sticking it out. That was the point where I was like, okay, that was the point where I felt like there's something more than just the town vigilante aspect to it, of Pennywise holding them there. So maybe that's a little bit different from what I was saying earlier of them getting there. 100% what Melissa was saying, 100%. But them staying there is where I feel like maybe that's kind of where Pennywise is stepping in and amping it up to make sure that this is gonna happen.
Yeah. And so my other note right before the battle, and we'll get into that. So Zach Denbrough, who was about 12 years old, burnt out of the area. but all the adults just blindly hung around. It's interesting that no kids were involved. So if this is Pennywise, he's using the adults and the kids are staying away, are, being put to use somewhere else, or just Pennywise wants them for feed later on, so they don't want them getting involved in this. I don't know if that's correct, but it's just something that stuck out to me where this is just adults and adult men at that.
The black spot was a little bit like that too, right? I mean, that was all adults. There weren't really, there were maybe older teenagers involved, but it was. But that one was on a military base too, so you wouldn't expect kids to be around. This is again August time, I believe, in a city where kids go back to school till Labor Day at least. Yeah, no, it's a little bit different clientele for Pennywise. Yeah. So let's get into the gun battle. Who wants to take it first? My notes just come towards the end of it. Okay. So I'll go with my last one then. Of all the attackers to get shot, Greg Cole was the only one to get a minor flesh wound to the hand. Those are some pretty impressive odds with as much firepower the Bradley gang was still using that they had already taken, from the shop before, 2 days before. So they were loaded up already.
Half of it.
They got at least half of it. So
maybe not half, because I don't think they got any of the machine guns, but they got a lot.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like, and maybe I just missed it, I didn't feel like they were returning fire that much. They were getting pumped full of lead well before there were any return shots at all.
Oh yeah, no, they weren't prepared at all. They had no idea this was coming. So but just with the amount of ammo and firepower they had that the town knew of,
and I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I'm surprised that, because they said at one point there were 50 to 60 men shooting at the car from different angles. Like, they're in each other's cross lines. They're not standing there in a firing squad. They're shooting at each other through, that's why I'm surprised. Because you have 50 or 60 single points with shooting lines. Yeah. Someone's going to get hit on your own team. That is not how you play capture the flag. You don't surround the person like that.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, with all that, only one person getting a minor flesh wound, that's pretty impressive.
Either that or they all suck at aiming.
Or they're all really good at aiming.
I got the fact, I thought they were terrible because how many did they put into this goddamn car? And all of them were still alive.
Well, yeah, but what I'm saying is they're good at aiming for not hitting one another. That's going to Luke's point of, at least they're getting the ammo down range.
Completely lucky or influenced by Pennywise that they weren't hitting each other.
Yeah.
There's very little chance that they're not going to hit each other, but they're also not hitting the gang. They're just loading the car up with the
wall.
Right.
That they all went to dig out the slugs from. I want to know what happened to all those slugs, because there were how many hundreds of slugs the guy dug out, and it was after everybody went and got their own.
Yeah, well, he said he dug out 30 something, I think.
Okay. I want to dig out a slug from the wall, and I want to know who has them, and I think Mike should go find some. Don't you think? Somebody's got to have them somewhere.
Maybe Pennywise has them.
They'll never tell you about them.
That's like the photo of Georgie. He collects things.
The high school teacher will tell us if we get on her good side.
Yeah.
That's
right. That's right. And Mr. Keene will tell you, but it's few and far between. That's the thing. So, talk about the clown.
Yeah.
Oh, how'd you know about the clown?
Right? Yeah. No, that was okay. That was where I was I'm glad I went back and reread the first interlude chapter, because that's really what connected. This is what I was hoping for in this interlude chapter, was another people know about it. I was hoping for some kind of connection like we get from Albert Carson early on in the book, and we get that. Mr. Keene, and apparently a lot of people know about this fucking clown. And it was crazy. I don't know, I'll go ahead and read the line that really stuck out to me. And it's basically when everyone's looking around and they all saw the clown from different places. And every single time, wherever the clown was holding the gun that the person that saw it was holding. So that was a really weird, obviously we know the clown is generally just in the subject's head. Other people can't necessarily see it. Everyone gets their own boggart out of this, is what we see. This is obviously a different application because it's a boggart that's working with you in this case to take out the Bradley gang and keep amping up, ratcheting up this slaughter. Execution is what they call it. And I don't know. Like, it definitely threw me for a little bit of a loop. Anyone that saw the clown only saw it holding the gun that same person was using. So it's like a self-projection of it, which is kind of, I haven't completely wrapped my head around what was going on there, but I really liked it.
Do you think the clown, or all the iterations of the clown, were shooting real bullets that had real effect?
No, I don't.
It was just the clown's way of saying you're doing the right thing. There's somebody else here with you doing this.
Or celebrating because, hi, I'm awake. I'm going to come play.
What's that?
Or just that he's awake now, right? This is
Yeah.
the start of the cycle. He just wanted to play. Not even influencing them. Just like, yay, look at this crazy thing. I'm awake. Here I am. I want to play. It's a party for me.
I kind of like what you were saying there, Benj, of, it's kind of like him kind of showing them that, hey, I'm with you. I'm doing this, which keeps them in that mob mentality even more so. Because if you see one of the people that you know and they're kind of flinching, showing a little bit of maybe not really wanting to do it, then that might cause you to hesitate, and he who hesitates is lost, as obvious. And the fact that you have someone there who's mimicking exactly what you're doing, and it's like that if you see someone kind of matching what you're doing in a conversation, the mimicry, if I hold my arms like you do when we're having a conversation, you tend to fall into trusting that person more. That's one of those psychological things out there, but I just find that's a very interesting point on it.
Yeah, and I kind of got the feeling, because when you're in a situation like that, if you're looking around at what other people are doing, you're contemplating or you're second guessing yourself or you're ready to be done. Mm-hmm. But you look around and you still see, hey, there's somebody still doing this. Let's keep going.
You're looking for that affirmation to keep doing it.
Exactly. So, all right.
I also liked that they get to there's also the possibility that it was a real clown. He said, back in the 20s and 30s, the county fair in Este came a lot earlier than it does now, and it was set up and going full blast the week that the Bradley gang met their end. I like the idea. Maybe it was just a real clown,
Yeah.
They were
a shadowless clown.
Right.
See, I like the idea that the Bradley gang just came to town so they could go to the carnival,
They weren't hurting anybody.
They just came up to go to the county fair. And
I just wanted ice cream.
They needed some rounds to practice because, those old county fairs had shooting galleries. So you got to get some practice in so you could win like the stuffed teddy bears and all that. That's all they wanted the rounds for.
Yeah. Let's be honest. They weren't very good shots, so they probably needed the practice.
Exactly.
No one here was a good shot.
Well, in the Bradley gang's defense, when you're getting 60 rounds at once fired at you, it's kind of hard to aim.
Yeah.
That adrenaline dump is...
Work around it.
No excuses. Play like a champion.
If you die,
coffee's for closers.
Walk it off.
All right, Melissa, finish us off.
Dairymen. Not that many of them raise cows. I think that's kind of funny. It took me a while to get it.
Yeah, I didn't get it until I read
I didn't get it. Now it's like, oh, dairy, because they're dairy farmers, but they're not raising cows. They're just dairymen. It's a play on the cow industry. So it was kind of cheesy, like an old joke of dairy.
Oh, dairy jokes. Oh. I didn't catch that. I missed that one.
Let's see how long we can milk this for.
Oh, man. This joke is definitely curdling.
Your dad jokes are a bunch of bull.
Have we soured you, Melissa?
It's sour.
We're moving on. What's next?
You get the last one.
I did that already.
Yeah, nope. She had mentioned the shadowless clown, and so along with that, the thing that kind of leads to that, I also thought was interesting, the leaning out the window way too far, kind of Michael Jacksoning on stage out the window is how I viewed that, right? Right? Just woo.
I'm done. What's next?
All right. Then that'll wrap up our recap. I couldn't come up with any questions. Do you have anything, Melissa? So, all right, we don't have anything for the new reader on this one, Luke. So, did you have any questions or theories or thoughts?
I don't know. I liked this chapter. I thought it was very interesting, kind of for the same reason that I liked the first interlude chapter. I liked Mr. Keene in his knowledge that he's dropping on Mike here. I thought that was very valuable, and the stuff that I am just dying to learn more about, like these historical things that we've heard so much in passing about, but then getting more context. And they even touch on a few things again here as well, like on the old Kitchener Ironworks, and when they, at the very opening of the chapter, when they talk about the ceremonial thing. And I don't know. I liked the chapter. I don't know if I have any new real questions or predictions. They tend to stand alone. They're kind of outside the main narrative. But I like Mr. Keene, I think.
All right, well, Melissa, then we're going to move on to our favorite things. And what was yours?
Another a cappella singer in the damn choir that is this town. That's what these chapters are to me, is just hearing each of these voices get their own solos in the crazy shit that happens in Derry.
Yeah. Luke, what was your favorite thing?
My favorite thing was Mr. Keene, and kind of harkening back to the other old timers that were involved and how they all know about the clown and how they saw it that day, and just all the questions that we've already touched on of how much do these people know and why aren't they talking about it? Like, I love the questions about the town and the old timers and who knows what and how much, and yeah, I find that very, very compelling.
And that kind of ties into my favorite thing of, it's just a line from Mr. Keene. Wasn't no cover-up. It was just that no one talked about it much. And really, who cared? It wasn't President and Mrs. Hoover that went down that day. It was no worse than shooting mad dogs that would kill you with a bite if you gave them half a chance. Just, again, the casualness and the admittance of, I didn't forget about this. We didn't forget about this. We just don't talk about this. It's showing the true seeds of Derry, and I like that. So, that will wrap us up for this week's episode. You can find us on social media at Floats Down Here on Twitter. I'm usually the one responding on there. You can also send us a digital balloon at floatsdownhere@gmail.com. You can find all of our shows, including our support us page at thepodcastthat.com, where you can get stuff from the Derry Home Heights Mall, or our new TeePublic store, which will have some cool little merch added on there. Make sure you subscribe and rate us on iTunes.
Don't forget to check out our Patreon account at patreon.com/stayimaginary, where you can support this show and all of the shows for the podcast, that family of podcasts, by joining and giving a monthly donation. I particularly want to recommend the Centurion level. It's $7 a month. That gives you access to our official Slack team. We're pretty funny on there. You get shout outs. You also get access to our Legion exclusive episodes and early access to Legion favorite episodes, as well as being enrolled in monthly Centurion giveaways. So we definitely want you to check that out and help us continue to make excellent content for you.
So next time, we'll be talking about Chapter 13, An Apocalyptic Rock Fight. You'll float too.
Stay imaginary.
Thanks!